let me go to my man. We're joined the man himself, Carl Jha. Carl Jha, and let me get this right, host a Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow the podcast at Steel Silk, letter N, and you can subscribe to support the podcast on patreon.com/Silk and Steel. Carl, my man, how you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I'm doing good, Jamar. Always be happy to be back.
Oh, thank you, man. I was happy to have you. I am super curious on your take on this. You've pointed out on more than one occasion, you said the U.S. doesn't have the balls to go after China. You were very clear about that. You said that months ago. You was like, I don't care what they say. They don't have the balls to do it. And this was even before the rare earth stuff came up. Your point was basically they've lost every military exercise they've gotten into. They're not as suicidal as they seem. And apparently somebody at the Pentagon heard you, Carl, because the new assessment that came out is effectively saying, hey, let's prioritize stuff at home and less about China and Russia. First question, do you even believe this report?
I have no reason to doubt it. I mean, you have the defense secretary. Well, I'm sorry, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who have before he assumed the title of Secretary of War, during a media interview he conducted, he has said as much. He said, in an event of a conflict, China will be able to wipe out all the U.S. carrier groups in Asia Pacific within the first 20 minutes. So he knows this. He knows this. This is and the parade, the China's Victory Day parade, just drove home to that point. China just showcased whole slew of goodies. They have hypersonic missile, hypersonic glider vehicle, hypersonic cruise missile, all these things that United States don't even possess. And U.S. will have very difficult time to put anti-ballistic defense against what China has. We already saw what happened in the 12-day Israel-Iran war. Israel had the world's most sophisticated, layered anti-missile defense. They had planes scramble to shoot down incoming drones in Jordan and Syria. They have the U.S. THAAD missile system, which costs $1 billion a pop to fire $12 to $13 million per pop interceptor missiles. And then you have Israel's Iron Dome, Davis Sling, and you have the U.S. Navy using its Aegis system from Mediterranean to shoot down Iranian missile. All that failed. That could not stop Iranian missiles from landing. And you won't take too many missiles to sink the U.S. aircraft carrier. China has much more missiles and much more advanced missiles than Iran. So Pete Hegseth was correct, in his initial reading of the situation. And I have argued on your show before that despite the rhetoric of pivot to Asia, that's not happening. It's in fact, they're strategically withdrawing. They're pulling back all the way to Guam, to the second island chain. And now we're seeing it actually being formulated in policy. I think they have been watching our show, Jamar. They must be watching our show, and they have come to their senses. And the irony, the man who was tasked to write this plan supposedly was none other than Ulrich Kobe, the Undersecretary of Defense Policy, the man who based his entire career on containing China. The man wrote a book on containing China. And he was a big advocate of wrapping up the war in Ukraine, pull out of West Asia, so we can concentrate all our resources to contain China. And it must be a bitter pill for him to swallow, because he was actually tasked to write up this plan to actually pivot away from China. But this is and this, unfortunately, though, there's a caveat. Unfortunately, this does not bode well for Latin American countries, because the flip side of the drafted plan is they say, okay, we got to focus on our own hemisphere. We got to, reimpose our Neil Monroe's doctrine on Latin America. This is why Trump is sending 4,000 servicemen to cruise around in worship around Venezuela right now. That's what we're trying to do. But again, there's always a caveat. The caveat is that U.S. empire is not run like Russia or China, right? Russia or China have a coherent national policy with long-term planning. You can trust Xi Jinping to execute things like Made in China 2025, which they have largely accomplished. And you can trust Xi Jinping to see through the expansion of Chinese military power. But this is the United States we're talking about. Even if Trump administration draft this plan, it doesn't mean it's going to get executed. This is U.S. is a collective is a collection of oligarchs competing for power. There's many conflict of interest. Like Trump said, he wanted to wrap up Ukraine war. I mean, it still hasn't happened yet. You know, he said he was going to make it happen within 24 hours of his getting elected. Well, it's what, like 9 months later, and there's a lot of inertia in the U.S. Imperial machine, right? And so even though if they want to execute this so-called withdrawal from Asia to focus on Latin America, it doesn't mean that plan is going to get executed according to the plan. And on top, but even so, even if U.S. do not withdraw resources from Asia at the time, it still means they're losing out to China, because Chinese military is growing year after year after year. We saw that. We saw the result of that on the Chinese military parade on full display. I mean, the whole message of that military parade is China is telling U.S. we can no longer be contained. Good luck, buddy. And then even if the U.S. keep its current military posture in East Asia, Western Pacific at stable level without reducing anything, they're still losing in relative terms against China in the power balance, because China has local superiority. China is not planning to fight United States in the Caribbean, in the North Atlantic, in Africa. Chinese military is designed to win a war around China's neighborhood. And all of Chinese Navy, which numerically already outnumbers the number of ships that U.S. Navy possess, is all concentrated in one area, Western Pacific. So China has absolute local superiority in the region. And this is the problem that U.S. faces when you try to fight China. It has to cross this so-called tyranny of distances, 7,000 miles from U.S. mainland to go to Asia to fight China. That's why they had tried to loop in South Korea. They tried to loop in Japan. They tried to loop in Australia. So, to get them to act as a missile sponge, to sponge the first wave of Chinese missiles, so there will be less missiles for U.S. target. But I mean, I don't know how well that plan is executed. They just they just got videotaped dragging South Korean engineers in chains and cuffs. And this is a company that was invited to invest in United States. These South Korean engineers, they didn't come here to take American jobs. They came here to set up the factory so the factory can employ more American workers down the road. And yet, what did the U.S. do? They made a huge spectacle, like the whole humiliation ritual of dragging the South Korean engineers away in chains. I mean, this will be very, very hard to swallow for South Korean public. I mean, they and then you are telling them you guys are gonna act as our missile sponge so you can sponge missile attack from China. I don't think that's gonna fly. I mean, this is why they are doing this. I think finally Pentagon is realizing their limitations. So they at least recognize the problem. Whether they can execute it successfully, that's a different matter. But now they have gone through the 5-step grieving process cycle, Jamar. They went through denial, anger, bargaining, depression. Now we're finally coming to acceptance stage. And
It's funny. I can imagine Eldred Kobe crying on his typewriter as he's typing this document. Like, my entire life has been a waste. My entire life of trying to contain China. I mean, they had been talking about 2027 as the year. And I don't know where they got that year from. I honestly don't. China, as you pointed out, in that military parade, that wasn't even their best military products. China has hypersonic missiles, hypersonic glide bombs. China has missile systems that can hit boats from hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. How do you intend to get to the location, even have the fight before your boats are being taken out? Like, all of this stuff was a fool's errand. And yet they still kept this mindset. And there's one thing I want to piggyback on. Inertia. All of those neocons that have dedicated their lives to going after China, do you think they're going to be swayed by this? Do you think they're going to look at this document and say, hey, you guys make a really good point, rationally? Or is it going to be pure ideology? We're the US. We can do whatever we want. We have no limits. Damn it, we're still going to push this horse, or kick this horse.
You have to think why that news was leaked to the press. First of all, there's no investigative journalism in mainstream media right now, right? Yeah. It's all access journalism. This is all strategic leaks. And you got to ask yourself, why is this plan leaked to the public, right? So I see a couple possibilities. One, there's some member of the administration, maybe Rich Kobe himself, wasn't happy about the direction where this is going, so they decided to leak it. Or this is leaked by administration themselves to put pressure on countries like Venezuela. Like, just say, hey, we're going to put you on notice. We're going to put all our might on you now, full pressure. I mean, that's a second possibility. Because I as I talk about on other show, the 4,000 military servicemen so far sent to Venezuela, they're not going to make a dent on Venezuela. But what they intend to do is to serve as a visual big stick to intimidate. And probably they're hoping by applying that pressure, maybe inspire some kind of color revolution, instability inside Venezuela itself. I think that's kind of the U.S. modus operandi from now on. They have realized the limitation of their hard power. Now they're relying more on sabotage, color revolution, and this kind of proxy war. Rather than going all out, World War III style civilization ending war against China. So I think that's what's playing out right now. But you're right. There will be a lot of resistance from all across the aisle in Congress, and look at what they're doing right now. Texas just announced a plan to ban CCP from owning farmland in Texas. I mean, this is just fear mongering, because if you actually look at the numbers, China owns like less than 1% of all the foreign owned land in United States. I mean, it's statistically insignificant. They're just signaling out CCP because they're just using this issue of fear mongering to maybe draw support from their voter base or to get votes, but it has no impact. Well, it does have impact because China is already not buying farm produce from United States. They're switching to buy beef and soybean from Brazil. This is actually why Trump has been going really hard on India, wanting India to open up its farm produce market for American farm produce, because soybeans are getting piled up in United States right now because China are not taking them. So they want India to step in. And this is completely foolhardy, and this remind me again as a Chinese professor Zhang Weiwei, professor of geopolitics in Fudan University. He said Trump understands all the problem in the United States. But all the solution he applies to the problem make things much, much, much worse.
That video that I was showing, to back up your point, these are farmers in the United States praying to Jesus for help because their farms are effectively tanking now that China has decided to, we're not buying your products anymore, so you're going to have a tariff war. Fair enough. We'll go to Brazil. We'll go to other countries in order to get to allow them to import the stuff that you were using. So instead of having 1.4 billion people to give your products to, so now they're praying to God.
Yeah, I mean,
they're literally praying to God.
Good luck selling beef to India. I mean, good luck exporting beef to India. And but the problem is Trump is screwing his voter base right now. All those rural areas, those farm producing regions, they're red. They're red states. They're the Republican governors, the Republican senators, House of Representative Trump. They're collectively screwing their own voter base. What can I say? Trump is my president. Again, I need to reiterate, I'm all for Trump to stay the God Emperor of the United States from now to eternity, because he's the best president for the accelerationism of American imperial decline, and I'm here for it.
That's a hell of a shift. Like, I don't know if, we'll see. We'll see if they implement it. I'm very doubtful they're going to implement this. What they seem to be doing, though, is not necessarily pulling out entirely. They're trying to take the U.S. out of harm's way. Meaning it's kind of like, hey, South Korea and the Philippines and Taiwan and Australia, we need you to die for the dignity of the United States. We will give you moral support. And we may get you to buy our weapons, but we do not want to be, as you point out, the sponge of Chinese missiles and Chinese armaments. And same thing in Ukraine and Europe, right? Where in that same document, they're saying how, we're going to stop giving money to these places that are around Ukraine. We're probably going to be pulling out our troops. And so we need you to deal with that for here on out. You can buy our weapons with a 10% markup. just hashtag because. But we need you to deal with that issue from here on out. We will give you advice. But if
this is
why
why
Russia loses it one day, it's on you.
This is exactly what they're doing. They're shifting the burden to their supposedly allies. In Europe, it's the EU, and in Asia, allies, really vassals. But but this is why they keep on yelling at Taiwan. Like if you read newspaper, like every few months, they will be yelling at Taiwan. Taiwan is not doing enough for its own defense. Taiwan is not spending enough for its own defense. Why are you not buying more American weapons? Right? I mean, but Taiwanese is like, what do you mean? We want you to die for our freedom. We expect you to bleed and die for us, not the other way around. So I mean, like this is a joke. This is this is not gonna. I trust the Asians. The Asians are a little bit smarter than Europeans, I have to tell you. And,
I hope they are.
Well, the Europeans are 100% being captured right now. I mean, their leadership have been totally captured by Washington. So that's a hopeless case. But in Asia, they're the countries in Asia, they're always hedging. They're always hedging, and this is why. South Korea, and countries like I don't know about Australia. Australia is actually the foolhardy one who will always follow United States. But even Japan does not necessarily want to see a war in its neighborhood, because if a war were to take place in East Asia, it's going to be East Asian city that's going to be wrecked, right. And the East Asian economy that's going to be disrupted. So none of the country in the region actually want to see a war, and most of the people just want to be left alone and start, do trading and profit. And so this is a area where United States is having less power of persuasion than they had in Europe, because the gravitational pull of the Chinese economy is such that all the neighbors are now being pulled into the orbit of the Chinese economy.
Mm-hmm. Also, like I'm in the middle of writing an article, and I was kind of pointing out this argument that's being made among the various countries of the world, whereas the U.S. has become a naked hegemon. So is Europe, right? I mean, Europe is, mind you, nothing by themselves, but they've lumped in with the United States kind of as, we're going to ride this boat till it sinks. But if you have two arguments that are being made, one, we're the naked hegemon, we're indispensable, we need you to die for us, etc. And the other argument is, we don't want war. We believe in national sovereignty. We're not going to intrude upon your domestic events. When we come into your country, we're going to build bridges, hospitals, roads, et cetera, et cetera. And we believe in the dignity of nations and international law. Okay, you tell me, given those two arguments, which one is more favorable to you? Now, you may be scared of the US, in which case you may go to daddy on some level because you don't want daddy to come after you. But at 3 a.m. between you and your God, which argument makes more sense? And obviously it's China's argument. Let's have a world that's not insane. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Like you said, the orbit of China, just the gravity of it in and of itself pulls many of these countries in. And by the way, even Europe, I just saw the trade data with Europe. It was like a 29% jump or something. Insane levels of Europeans buying Chinese goods. So you're absolutely right. I think my biggest fear was that the U.S. recognizes that in an economic contest, it can't compete. It can't compete technologically, can't compete industrially. And my fear was that it was going to go to military as a load balancer of trying to kind of balance out those events. We will see if this document is accepted, because it seems that they're now even coming to the conclusion of even this will be a bad idea. So
Jamar, this is why I disagree with Mearsheimer. I have very high respect for Mearsheimer. I think he understands the mentality of U.S. foreign policy perfectly. He knows how U.S. empire works. But if you actually, Mearsheimer's idea kind of mirrors Ulrich Kolbe, right? So like, China is our closest near competitor. Forget about Europe. Europe is a declining basket case. Forget about West Asia. Let's pull all our resources to contain China. But the problem, if you look at Mearsheimer's track record, he was right about Ukraine is going to get wrecked. He's right about all this, but U.S. policy never followed his recommendations. He was dead set against of going to screw around Ukraine, because that will lead a blowback from Russia. Well, guess what? U.S. went ahead and poked the bear. And he was dead set against U.S. being manipulated by Israeli lobby to drag into the war in Middle East. Well, guess what? U.S. never getting out of that because of Israel. And so that somehow you think that Mearsheimer's policy recommendation is going to be taken seriously this time around. That's not going to happen. Just take Mearsheimer's advice and figure, okay, U.S. government will probably do exactly opposite what he wanted to do. So this, again, comes down to U.S. is kind of this decrypt empire, but with tentacles all around the world, with many competing interests, and these imperial inertia also bog down the machine. They can't really function effectively, like acting with a single brain. Instead, it's acting just like octopus with many tentacles, but each tentacle have their own brains. So this is why Trump cannot wrap up the war in Ukraine. That's why U.S. probably never going to get out of West Asia, and this is why they will never pivot to Asia to contain China. And even the operation they're going against Venezuela, from the current observations, they haven't sent in more military hardware to reinforce those 4,000 servicemen that set out there. So it doesn't look like they're serious about doing a large-scale invasion. because Trump is such a type of person. He want to go for the low hanging fruit. He want to go for the easy victory. He doesn't want to get bogged down in a costly, quagmire situation. So if Venezuela quickly fold, this guy, he will just claim victory, claim he's a great peacemaker. If he doesn't, he can always kick the blame to one of his visors, right? And then be done with it. And that's just the personality of Trump. And so I think as long as Venezuela's domestic situation is stable, I think they will be fine. And they just have to wait out United States.
From your mouth to God's ears. I mean, they have been ramping up in Puerto Rico, using it as a staging base.
What they're really doing in Venezuela, like they say, oh, we're going to put secondary sanction on Venezuelan oil. Well, guess what? Trump just granted a waiver to Chevron to ship 2 tankers full of Venezuelan oil to the United States. So what they're really against is for Venezuela to sell their oil to China. Because now China is one of the largest foreign buyer of Venezuelan oil, and China is actually helping Venezuela to upgrade their oil sectors, and because Venezuela is incredibly oil rich. It has the world's largest oil reserve, but the problem is they don't have refining capacity. So Venezuela essentially is exporting crude oil and importing gasoline and refined petrochemical product. So now China is moving in, trying to help upgrade Venezuelan infrastructure so they can get more bang for their buck for their own natural resources. That's what United States want to prevent, because they want Chevron to maintain their monopoly on the Venezuelan oil. And also United States can't really do without the Venezuelan oil, because most of the refinery on southern United States, they are set up to refine the heavy type of crude that Venezuela produces. Whereas in the more recent years, due to fracking, all the oil that's coming from the shale oil, they're light sweet oil. They're not really fit for those old refineries set up to refine heavy crude oil. So what U.S. is doing is exporting the shale oil it gets from fracking, and it's importing Venezuelan oil for refining. This is why Chevron got its waiver. So they still need the Venezuelan oil. They just don't want China to get its hands on the Venezuelan oil. So I expect there will still be competition, but you will move into kind of hybrid warfare stage where they will mix a economics pressure, like tariffs and financial sanctions, and together with proxy war, color revolution, to put pressure on what they see as a weaker link among the BRICS countries, member nations. I think that's what's going to happen.
Now, to be fair, Venezuela is not part of BRICS.
It's not, but it wants to, but it's not.
Because, it's close. Yeah. From my understanding, Lula wasn't a big fan of.
Exactly. they have a very I don't understand why Venezuela and Brazil have this testy relationship, but you're right. Because of that, they're not member of the BRICS.